In this channel today, we would like to hear the lecture of Mbuyiseni Ndlozi. Mbuyiseni Ndlozi was born in 1985 or 9th May. He is a South African politician, radio host, and a political activist. He was a member of the National Assembly, representing the economic freedom fighters from 2014 until his resignation in January 2025. He also served as the first official spokesperson for the party until his resignation in 2020. He was replaced as a party spokesperson by fellow member of the economic freedom fighters, youth activist Mbuyiseni Ndlozi. In February 2025, Ndlozi officially resigned from the EFF as a member and the party politics. So, in this speech, he was addressing to the university students and the prominent people of Malawi in Zomba at the University of Malawi campus in the Great Hall. So, let us hear what a wonderful speech Mr. Mbuyiseni Ndlozi made.
To my brother, my comrade, the Minister of Trade and Industry, Mr. Vutimbiko Mumba, Paramount Chiefs, Ondabezita, moderator and executive members of the Ngoma Synod, Livingstonia Synod, Plain Trust Synod, Chairman of Public Affairs Committee, Chairman and executive members of the Zomba CCJP, Vice President of the Political Science Association and your executive members, the Deputy Vice Chancellor, the Registrar, the Chairperson of Council, and the entire University of Malawi management. Former Deputy Speaker of Parliament, I hope you are not going to say point of order to me at some point tonight. The leaders of different political parties that are here, the students of Malawi University, Mubasa Catholic University, Mas and Tomasi College of Education. It is my great privilege this evening to give a talk to this important gathering which seeks to inculcate the culture and do a counterculture to the prevailing politics on our continent that have largely failed to prioritize people and their needs. It is, as I imagine, axiomatic that at this stage that ours is the poorest region in the world. Africa, which is over half a century after colonial independence, remains the place of darkness. A continent made in the image of poverty, of wars, disease unemployment, and cultural inferiority. Close to 430 million of Africa's total population lives in extreme poverty, measured by those who survive on less than $1 a day. For 500 years, since the first ships loaded with millions of chained black bodies who slaved in the Americas for the enrichment of white supremacists of European colonial expansion. For 400 years since the colonial settlements and conquerors of our lands and people by key European empires of the English, the French, the Belgians, the Portuguese, the Germans, and the Dutch. An era of colonial extraction accompanied by episodes of genocidal extinction, administrative massacres, and the systemic exclusion of the African from global cultural developments, especially modern science and industry. Racial hatred drove the European to mark our continent and its people as inferior beings, that they could not participate in the universal movement of scientific and industrial thought. This, Comrade Vutimbiko, I argue, may very well be the biggest project of conquest ever unleashed on Africa, as it somehow guarantees Africa's dependency on European tutelage. The tragic fact that Africa, without Europeans, is unable to conduct its own affairs since the birth of modern capitalist development, and always already collapses into dysfunctionality, poverty, disease, war, in an endless movement of the creation of a subject incapable of self-rule, of self-love, of self-control, of self-reliance, in a permanent process of permanent juniority. Tonight we must ask, how did this happen? How is it that we are a people who always fail to act in our best interest? We seem always ready to turn against ourselves. And yet, how can we explain that regardless of the poverty of this continent, its wars, its diseases, and the multiple dysfunctional states, Europeans and Americans, and in recent years, the Chinese, have not failed to get whatever minerals that they want out of our continent? Alongside this is the reality of losses caused by illicit financial flows. According to the report of the high-level panel on illicit financial flows from Africa, headed by President Mbeki, it is estimated that over $60 billion is lost every year from the continent due to transfer pricing, base erosion, profit shifting, and corruption. To understand the magnanimity of this figure, consider the GDP of Malawi in the region of about $13 to $14 billion. Meaning, we are talking about 4 times the GDP of this country. Close to $60 billion every year lost to illicit financial flows. The enablers of these laws are weak government governing systems as well as inaccessible budgeting information, budget processes and procedures that are often not available to the general public, including legislative bodies, weak monitoring systems in custom duties, allowing mispricing of goods and services, including movement of public funds by politicians into private tax havens in places like Dubai and London, stealing from the public purse, moving those funds in processes of illicit financial flows for personal selfish benefit. Across our continent, we still are largely in the second industrial revolution. We still need trains, electrical connectivity, water and sewer infrastructure, and an African automobile industry, an African-made car. This is all the while the world has entered full steam into the fourth industrial revolution, whose capacity to emerge depends on the third industrial revolution innovations like the internet and digital technologies. The road, rail, and airport infrastructure connectivity of our continent was always identified as a key to the collective development needed for absolute breakthrough from underdevelopment. The massive improvement in electrical connectivity, including infrastructure related to water, sanitation, education, and healthcare. The world is already moving into the dimensions of artificial intelligence, intelligent machines and programs, at the center of which lies the human replacement in the very question of development that we speak of. This world, Honorable Minister, with this revolution of the tools of production taking place, is opening a new world order. Like the World Trade Organization now fully being undermined. It goes without saying that countries, for an example like Israel, with the full support of the United States, has lived all its existence since 1948 with the utter disregard of UN resolutions regarding its genocidal against Palestinians. But its recent genocidal campaign in Gaza is the worst yet, displacing millions, killing over 50 million, leaving hundreds of thousands missing or injured. The war campaign is the culmination of the total disregard of international law, human rights, and multilateral institutions. Similarly, the United States has ignored UN reports and recommendations and international law on many of its war campaigns that results in crimes against humanity, like the invasion of Iraq, Afghanistan, and the destruction of Libya, alongside utter disregard of our own continental conflicts. In the Eastern DRC, which is part of the Great Lakes region, one wonders about the role of the African Union, our own multilateral organization. Perhaps even its general inability to hold the actions of member states accountable. In the Sahel region, ECOWAS's rather unfortunate response to the political manifestations, for instance in Burkina Faso, which has launched a serious fight to secure total independence from those racists of France. Our own continental unity, coherence, is continuing to unravel. Nevertheless, for 35 years, the United States, Comrade Minister, was the single superpower in the world, matched by no one after the collapse of the USSR. At the turn of the century, the 21st century, developed countries in the world were limited to the former colonial forces, plus Russia. The rest of the world, from East Asia to the Indian subcontinent, from Africa to Latin America, were outside the capitalist industrial modernity or simply its mineral base component. But let us go back. Let us recall the proper ideas. You will remember that in the 1970s, it was Mao Zedong, in conversation with Kenneth Kaunda, who argued for a different international relations system, reorganized outside the West-East Cold War idea. He introduced the idea of the three-world theory. Mao argued that the international relations system has three contradictory economic centers or global provinces. In this theory, the first world included the then two superpowers, the United States and the USSR, with Europe and Japan and Canada as well as Australia. The third world, and that was the second world. The third world comprised of Africa, China, East Asia, the Indian subcontinent, the Caribbean, and Latin America. Today, Mao's China is fully fledged superpower in pure industrial, military, and cultural terms. It is part of the richest countries in the world, the greatest threat facing the United States today. It is part of the rich countries together with East Asian tigers over the last 35 years. India and Brazil are well on their path to become developed countries. In the Middle East, if we exclude African Arab countries and those who were targets of the 21st century US, if we consider Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, we in the continent cannot point to a single country amongst us with even the prospect of scientific and industrial power. We are at the bottom. And this bottom is not explicable. It's inexplicable. Why? Haunted by, amongst other things, the tragic contradiction related to the fact that we are the most minerally rich continent in the world. So how do we make sense of this contradiction? It is important to underscore this because our conversation is taking place in the radical change that is the industrial civilization in the international system, with the threat to environment standing at its center. The trade wars that are started by the United States signifies the United States' end or the end of the US's own hegemony in the world as a single superpower for 35 years. But it marks the beginning of a multipolar world. However, what shall be Africa's place in the new changing global system? We will not be able to change the position of our permanent juniority, the condition of being at the bottom of the world, or in a place that Achille Mbembe calls necropolity. I heard the minister earlier speaking about the self-perpetuating economy of coffins. Necropolitics relates to a place of death, a place of ghosts, the place that is at the center death drive, self-sabotage, self-mutilation, self-hate, and self-destruction. Our generation must ask the crucial question: how do we turn the leaf? It seems to me that there are three paths that are in front of us in this age of monsters. One is that we will continue in the path of self-mutilation, characterized by disunity, war, corruption, and underdevelopment. Two, we will get dismembered. We will get dismembered. This is very important. We are going to be dismembered into supporting different superpowers in the world. When the trade negotiations with the United States took place over the last 2 weeks, what happened? Africa was not one. Zimbabwe went to negotiate on its own. Rwanda went to negotiate on its own. We could not be united. This is similar, if you remember, to the occurrence of the Berlin Conference, where the then colonial powers drafted these borders that you now proudly defend today as your own borders. The border of Malawi and Mozambique, the border of Malawi and Zambia, the border of South Africa and Namibia. Africans, you Africans, were never consulted to whether these should be your borders. What that conference did, which was called the Berlin Conference, it can repeat itself, where superpowers gather elsewhere and divide Africa amongst each other because of Africa's inability to unite